When she arrived at her fiancé's ranch, everything seemed normal, until she saw a portrait on the wall of herself. No one explained anything. What happened next changed her name, her voice, and her right to the truth. Clara clutched the bread in her hands, still warm, slightly burnt on the bottom, as always. It was wrapped in a thick towel and smelled of caramel and freshness, like Sunday mornings at her grandmother's house. As a child, these smells saved her from screaming, from restless nights, from the gnawing feeling in her stomach that her mother wouldn't come again. She didn't believe in words, but she believed in bread, and now she held it in front of her like armor. She stood at the gate, wooden, dried out from the sun, with peeling blue paint. Someone had scratched their initials on the doorframe, long ago, illegibly, as if in a fit of rage. The wind blew dust from the road, through which dry grass was visible. Pine trees hung over the side, so silent that they seemed to reproach her. Mateo had called her yesterday, briefly, without unnecessary words. "Come, I want you to see where I grew up. No, my love, no, I'm waiting." Just like a memo, like a piece of paper from the office. Clara wasn't offended. She was used to it. Words were for other people. She had actions, and here she was, with bread, her face open, trying to be accepted. The door was opened by a man who looked like Mateo, only older and more stooped. He looked as if he had already regretted this visit 100 times, although he didn't say a word. A woman in an apron shuffled past, her face like a tired mountain. "Clara." Mateo stepped out of the shadow of the house, smiled slightly, but didn't hug her. "Come in." Inside it smelled of dust, boiled meat, and thyme. The room was spacious, but dull. There were streaks on the wallpaper, framed photographs, a polished sideboard, and that peculiar silence in which every sound seems superfluous. Clara put the bread on the table. "I baked it. Your father likes it with caraway, you said." No one touched it. Mateo looked away, and his mother glanced at it as if it were expired food. "We have bread." Clara nodded, as if she had heard something logical. She stood in the middle of a strange house, her hands clean and her body suddenly feeling useless. She wanted to leave, but her feet seemed to be glued to the floor. "Let's go," Mateo said, as if searching for the right words. "I'll show you the guest room." They walked down the hallway, which creaked with every step. Pictures hung along the wall, a pastoral scene, horses, someone in a hat against the backdrop of a sunset. And suddenly, Clara stopped. A chill struck her chest like the door of a refrigerator in the dark. There was a portrait hanging on the wall. A woman. It was her, only younger, with slightly different features. But it was her. The same eyes, the same shape of lips, even the mole on her cheekbone. "Who is this?" Her voice broke. Mateo stood a little behind her, silent, for a long time. And then he said, "We'll talk about it later." And he walked ahead. Clara was left alone, staring at the face she knew better than her own. The room smelled of paint and something sweet and stale. She stood rooted to the spot, everything inside her cracking, not from fear, but from something worse. Oblivion. We've only just begun this story, but it will become even more painful and true. Stay and see what a man who has been rejected by his own people is capable of. In the morning, Clara woke up from the cold. The window in the room where she had been placed was not completely closed. A draft swept across the floor like a cat, tickling her heels. She pulled the blanket tightly around herself, got up, and went to the kitchen to pour herself some water. The kitchen greeted her with the dry clatter of knives and the smell of overcooked oil. Mateo was already sitting at the table. His mother was wearing the same apron, her lips slightly pursed. Her father was silently reading the newspaper, or pretending to read. "Good morning," Clara said quietly. The only response was the rustling of pages. Mateo coughed. "I thought we could show her the fields today." "I don't know what you want to show her there," muttered his mother. "This isn't a sightseeing trip." Clara took a glass and filled it from an old carafe. The water was warm and cloudy. She gulped it down without thinking. "Can I help with anything?" she offered. "Maybe with breakfast?" Her mother looked at her with the same crooked condescension one might look at someone who had entered the wrong room. "Your hands are too soft, girl. You're obviously not used to work. We don't keep people like you around for long." Silence hung in the air like a cloud of cigarette smoke. Clara nodded slightly and sat down next to Mateo. His shoulders tensed. Software. That's what they used to say about dough that didn't rise, about women who let themselves be pushed around, about children who didn't argue. "You've always been too soft. That's why they walk all over you," her grandmother once said. Clara got angry then. Now she remembered, and realized how true it sounded. She turned away to the window. Outside, the wind swayed the laundry on the line like flags of surrender. "Tell me who's in the portrait," she asked, trying to keep her voice sound normal. Mateo looked at his mother as if waiting for permission, but she didn't even move. Only his father turned the page. "That's my cousin," Mateo said quickly. "She died a long time ago. She looked a lot like you. That's why they hung her." Clara smiled wryly. Not funny. Of course. And did she have a mole in the same place? His mother stood up abruptly and wiped her hands on her apron. "We don't have a habit of digging up the past. The living are the living, and the dead are left alone." She left, slamming the door behind her. Clara remained seated, feeling the skin on her shoulders tighten with tension. Mateo placed his hand on hers, hesitantly. "Please don't start. I don't know anything. No one explained anything to me." "You're a grown man. You could have asked." He was silent. He withdrew his hand. Clara stood up. She felt like she was in that kitchen, cold, with the smell of something burnt and stale. She went into the hallway and looked at the portrait again. Her face, her eyes. Only there was no fear or tenderness in them. Only indifference. Clara ran her fingers along the frame. Dry, dusty. Under the glass was a tiny crack, and at that moment, she realized it wasn't an accident. It was a mark of something that had long been hidden. We've reached a turning point. What happens next will change everything. You can't miss the ending of this story. The dust in this house was special. It smelled not just of old wood, but of something lost in time. Maybe it was overcooked grease. Maybe it was tobacco from Mateo's hands. Or maybe it was strangers' words stuck between the boards and walls. Clara noticed it everywhere. On the top shelves, on the windowsill, on the backs of chairs. She had lived here for less than a day, but she already felt the warmth leaving her. It was as if the house was sucking something invisible out of her, like a battery connected not to a socket, but to her heart. Mateo was polite, even caring, if you looked at it from the outside. He asked if she was comfortable, offered her tea, hugged her a couple of times, more out of habit than desire. But there was a pause between them, like an old record that skips before an important line. Clara didn't say anything out loud, but she could feel the coldness dripping from Mateo's family's eyes. His mother didn't look at her. His father acted as if she were just a piece of furniture, not a hint of a smile, not a single personal question. At lunch, the only sounds at the table were the clatter of cutlery. "How long have you been with her?" Mateo's father asked suddenly, without looking up. Clara turned to him, but he was staring at his plate. Mateo shrugged. "Almost a year." Strange that you didn't bring her home before." His mother speared a piece of potato with her fork and shot him a look that conveyed everything from irritation to mockery. Usually, if a man is serious, he introduces his girlfriend to his family sooner. Clara put down her fork. "Are you saying that I'm here by accident?" "I'm not saying anything," his mother snapped. "I'm just observing." "And I just baked some bread," Clara said, "and brought it as a sign of respect. I didn't know I had to fill out a questionnaire." Matteo tried to smooth things over. "Clara." "Not Clara," his mother interrupted. "It's not about names. We have our own rules." After lunch, Clara went to the barn, pretending to look for a watering can. In reality, she wanted to breathe. It smelled of hay, metal, and old sacks. She sat down on a box and, for the first time that day, allowed herself to be silent, not out of shame, but out of anger. Matteo came in later. He closed the door. "I'm sorry. They're always like that. Don't take it personally." Clara was silent. "Just give them time." She smiled. "Give time to people who took 15 minutes to realize that you're not a person, but a mistake? No, thank you. I'm an adult. I'm not a piece of dough that has to rise at someone else's temperature." Matteo sat down next to her. He looked tired. Not on the outside, but on the inside. As if he was tired of justifying why he grew up here. "We had a difficult time. My mother always kept everything under control. And my father, well, he just was. And you?" He shrugged. "I tried to be convenient. For everyone." Clara looked at him. "And now you want me to be the same? Convenient?" He didn't answer. Later, she went to the barn. Just to walk, breathe, not see the portrait or the eyes of that woman with the eyes of an old woman in the body of a 50-year-old housewife. The barn door was stuck, but it opened. Inside were an old sleigh, a red shovel, and several bundles of dried and forgotten herbs. And in the corner was a shelf. On it were several magazines, tattered, with pages torn out. And a photograph. It was the same girl in the portrait, only now she was with someone else. A man. His face was blurred, but one glance was enough to make Clara's heart skip a beat. This family knew. Matteo knew. Or pretended to. Clara left. There was no anger or fear on her face, only exhaustion. The kind you feel when you realize you're not a guest. You're a stranger. And even bread won't help. At night, the rain tapped on the tin roof over the entrance, hollow and rhythmic, as if someone was trying to say something, but kept repeating the same thing over and over. Clara couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the raindrops, and it seemed to her that the whole house was like that sound, repeating itself, through generations. Her back ached from the uncomfortable mattress, but she didn't turn over. Too many thoughts, too much silence. And most of all, that face in the portrait. Her own face. Only in a past she didn't know. At dawn, she got up, got dressed quickly, and threw on a stranger's jacket from the hallway. She stepped barefoot onto the wooden porch. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick and wet. The ground stuck to her feet. She was drawn to the stairs leading to the basement. Matteo had mentioned that there used to be a toolbox under the steps. She didn't know why she was going there. She just walked, as if she were looking for breath, or the truth, or both. The basement was low, with stone walls and a wooden floor. Light filtered through the cracks between the boards, and dust particles floated in it. It smelled of rust, mice, and damp wood. Clara found the light switch by touch. It lit a dim lamp on the ceiling. In the corner, under the workbench, stood a box, blackened, with a broken lid. Clara opened it as one opens one's mouth before saying something one is afraid to say. There were letters inside, old ones. Some were in tattered envelopes. Others were simply rolled-up sheets of paper held together with tape. They were all written in the same handwriting, not hers. But inside, Clara opened one, and she knew she didn't need to read it. The name written at the top was enough. The name of the woman in the portrait. And her own. Everything inside her stirred, as if someone had tapped her ribs from the inside. She held the letter like a knife, her fingers trembling as if in a fever. She heard footsteps behind her. Matteo, what are you doing here? His voice was tired, not frightened. More like someone who hoped this would never happen. Clara didn't turn around. These are letters. From whom? Why are they here? Matteo didn't answer. She turned around. His face was stone. Why didn't you tell me anything? Because I myself didn't know where to start. She moved closer. She picked up one of the envelopes. This was in your parents' house, under the stairs. So they knew. Everyone knew. And I'm the only one who came here like a fool with bread. He looked away. You knew, Matteo. Maybe not everything. But you knew. And you didn't stop me. He was silent. She nodded. I understand. Then I'll find out myself. And she left without waiting for an answer. She didn't cry. She didn't even scream. Something inside her had been triggered that couldn't be turned off, like an old stove that had been lit once and would now either heat or burn everything around it. What she finds next will turn her whole life upside down. Family, truth, love, everything will be called into question, and you have to be here to see how the person they wanted to break starts to fight back. Clara walked barefoot across the morning yard, not noticing the wet earth sticking to her feet. The grass crunched under her feet, as if it didn't know how to behave around this woman. The woman who had never fed in here from the very first step. The house was behind her, gloomy, deaf, with windows that didn't let in light, but rather watched. She hid the letters in her bosom, as she had once hidden her wound, so that others wouldn't smell the blood. Father Matteo was sitting on a bench under the canopy, smoking, slowly, with the expression that only the most stubborn men have. No sympathy, no guilt, only reproach. Clara sat down at the other end without asking permission. You knew, didn't you? She said hoarsely. He didn't look at her. He just took a drag. Women always want what they don't ask for, Clara snorted. And men always keep quiet when you expect something from them. He threw the cigarette butt into a wet can. You don't understand what you're getting yourself into. And you don't understand who you're talking to. I'm not a doll you can show a picture to and expect to smile. He stood up. You can leave, now. And you? Will you be able to sleep with this on your conscience? He didn't answer. He just walked away, his footsteps heavy, as if Clara's words had left dents in his body. Matteo found her in the attic. It was dry and smelled of old books and mice. Clara was sitting among the junk, boxes of Christmas decorations, moth-eaten scarves, tins of nails. She was holding a letter in her hands. Her eyes were filled with the tension of someone who was about to explode or fall apart. I don't know how to explain it, he began. I myself grew up in this house, but no one ever told me anything. Only hints, half-truths. The portrait appeared when I was about 10. They said she was my sister, then my cousin. Then it didn't matter. Clara didn't look at him. Didn't you ask? I was afraid. Everything here is done through silence, through looks, through you'll understand. And you want me to understand through silence, too? Through this stinking basement and the photograph on the wall? He came closer and sat down next to her. I didn't know, Clara. But now you do. And do you want to leave? Clara looked up. And if I stay, what? Will I become another shadow that isn't allowed at the table? A woman who bakes bread, but doesn't get a single piece. He fell silent, and that was enough. Clara stood up and dusted her knees. I'm not in the habit of running away, but I won't swallow it anymore. Then, what will you do? She looked out the window. Down below, Mateo's mother was hanging laundry, evenly, neatly, as if nothing had happened, as if no box of bones had been opened inside the house. I'll stay, Clara said, but not as a guest, as someone who will ask questions, even if no one answers. Mateo sighed, not with relief, with anxiety. Clara walked toward the stairs, as if she were walking on ice. She knew that whatever came next would not be about comfort and tea. It would be a struggle. But to leave now would be to admit that this family was stronger than her, and she had left so many times before. From strangers' kitchens, from cold apartments, from strangers' beds. This time she would stay. And if it hurt, at least she would face it with her eyes open. Clara entered the kitchen, where Mateo's mother was standing at the stove, stirring something in a heavy pot. The smell was pungent, with onions and something burnt, as if the food was angry at being cooked. Clara stood next to her, without a word. For a few seconds, she just stood there. The woman didn't turn around, but she began to stir more slowly. We need to talk, Clara said calmly. If you're talking about that box, her mother began. No one has touched it in a long time. I'm talking about what's going on here. About the fact that I walk around a house where a copy of me hangs on the wall, and no one thinks it's necessary to say anything. Not everything in life requires an explanation, she said. Sometimes silence is caring. Clara laughed. Care? Are you serious? Silence is like a family heirloom here. It's passed down from generation to generation until it crushes everyone. Mateo's mother put down her spoon and turned around. You want to know the truth? Fine, but don't be surprised if you don't like it. I'm a grown woman. I'm not expecting a fairy tale. Then don't cry when you find out. Clara looked into her eyes. They were the same gray as Mateo's, but there was no life in them. Only fatigue and habit. I won't cry, Clara replied. I just want to know why I feel like a shadow here. Why do you look at me like I'm a mistake? And who is that woman in the portrait? Later, her mother snapped. Dinner will be at 6. Clara left, not because she agreed, but because she understood that doors in this family only opened when they were kicked. That evening, the dinner table was quiet. Mateo hardly ate. His father picked at his food. His mother was silent. Clara put down her fork and looked at everyone. I'm staying here for a couple of days, and I'm not leaving until I get some answers. Mateo looked up. Clara, are you sure? Are you? She narrowed her eyes. Do you want me to leave? He lowered his gaze. His mother stood up. This is our home. It's not your place to make demands. Clara stood up too. I'm not a guest here anymore. I'm a person you haven't told a lot to. The words hung in the air. Even the spoons froze. Mateo's father stood up first and quietly left. His son followed him. His mother remained standing opposite Clara. You'll get what you ask for, but don't complain later that you weren't warned. Clara sighed. Better the bitter truth than your compote silence. At night, she lay staring at the ceiling. Her body was on the bed, but it felt like she was sleeping on nails. The house reacted to her presence like an organism to a splinter. But she knew there was no turning back. It was a choice, the first real choice in a long time. to stay and pull the rot out, even if something inside her broke in the process. The next morning, Clara decided to leave the house early, before anyone could suggest she keep quiet, for her own good again. She took the rubber jug she had noticed the day before from the kitchen and headed for the well, which stood away from the main courtyard behind the barn. There was already a man there, a young guy in a baggy shirt and a wide-brimmed hat. He was sitting with his legs dangling in the grass, drawing something on the ground with a long stick. Hearing footsteps, he turned and raised an eyebrow. "You're not from around here?" Clara stopped. "Spot on. And guess what? Am I here of my own free will or as punishment?" He grinned. "Then you must be a relative. Welcome to the family circus." She came closer and set down the jug. "Who are you?" "Tomas. Mateo's cousin, on my father's side. I help out with the horses sometimes. But mostly, I try to stay out of trouble." Clara poured water, listening to the drops hit the sides of the jug. It was the first voice she had heard in several days that did not sound cold or reproachful. "So you know things aren't going well here?" Thomas shrugged. "Nothing's going well here. Only the pillows in Grandma's house, and even those are lumpy." Clara laughed. For the first time in days, it was genuine. "Did you know the woman in the portrait?" she asked cautiously. He paused. Then he stood up and came closer. "You look a lot like her, only your eyes are different. She had a look, like a closed house. Yours is like someone who knocked on the door." "People say I'm soft," Clara nodded. "And you're like that. Right away with the doors." "Soft?" Thomas leaned against the well. "That's not a vice. It's just that in houses like this, softness is considered a crack, so it doesn't leak out." Clara looked at him. "Why aren't you here? Why aren't you sitting at the table with the others?" He grunted. "I tried, but here, the table is where everything is swallowed." "I don't know how to swallow. It's easier for me to be the horse helper than the one who sits silently in the hall." They fell silent. But it was a good silence, the kind where someone is just there and you're not alone. Clara ran her finger along the handle of the jug. "Thanks for talking. It's rare around here. Talk whenever you want. I'm not furniture, although if you need me to, I can pretend to be a stool." Clara smiled. "Better yet, a chair with armrests. I'm tired of holding everything up." They parted without saying anything else, but something had been established between them. Not a promise, not friendship, just understanding. It was as if, in this house full of emptiness, one person had suddenly become a little closer, and on that day, Clara felt for the first time that maybe not all of her family was a shadow. Maybe some of them knew how to listen after all, or at least not hide their eyes. The morning began with silence, but not the oppressive silence inside the house, but a light, rural silence, when the wind rustles the shutters and something creaks in the distance, like an old back. Clara went outside, carrying a ladle and a pot, not because anyone had asked her to, but simply because she felt like making soup, by herself, in her own way, to feel like she wasn't a guest, at least in some small way. Mateo's mother stopped on the porch with a laundry basin. She looked at Clara as if for the first time. "Do you know how to make soup?" "No, of course not. I'm just pretending to be a woman." The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "No one here will thank you." "I'm not expecting it. I'm not cooking for thanks. I'm cooking so there's a smell that doesn't stink." Silence. Then the mother walked past without saying another word, but she didn't judge either. That was something. Clara cooked. She chopped the vegetables as best she could, unevenly, not like on cooking shows. She remembered how her grandmother used to do it in the summer kitchen, whispering under her breath like a spell. Back then, there was no love in the house either, only salt and boiling water. but even that saved them. At lunchtime, she put the pot on the table. She didn't call anyone. She just put it there and sat down. Matteo came out first. He saw it and froze. Did you cook this yourself? No, I hired a team of chefs from TV. He sat down. He carefully scooped some up. He tasted it. He nodded. It's hot, he said. Don't be afraid. The only thing that can burn you here is this soup. His mother came in, then his father. Everyone silently took a plate. No thanks, no complaints. They just ate. And in that silent spoonful of soup, there was more peace than in all of yesterday's conversations. In the evening, Clara went out for a walk. Thomas was already waiting by the barn, as if that was the right thing to do. The soup was fine, he said. Even the old man ate it. He usually seems to live on anger and crackers. They walked along the overgrown path, where the grass clung to their legs. Clara felt her shoulders relax. For the first time in several days, she wasn't tense. Your mother, she said. She knew everything from the beginning. Of course, everyone here knows everything. They just say it's not the time. And in their opinion, the time never comes. Clara stopped. Tomas, tell me honestly, do you know who she is? The one in the portrait? He stared at the ground for a long time. Then he nodded. Yes, but I can't be the one to tell you. It's not cowardice. It's just not my story. Whose is it? Matteo's? His parents? Yours, only yours. And you'll find it yourself, even if you go cursing and angry. They were silent. I'm scared, Clara admitted quietly. Because I feel like it's not just a portrait. It's not a coincidence. It's something I don't want to know. But you'll find out who you are, not who they are. Who you are. It's worth the fear. Clara nodded. Sometimes I think it would be easier to just leave, pack myself up like a suitcase, and close the door on all of this. Thomas smiled. Some suitcases open by themselves, even when you're traveling. The next day, Clara began gathering old photographs from the sideboard, carefully, patiently, and suddenly she found it. A postcard. With wishes. With a signature. A name. The one. The same as her middle name, which no one had called her in a long time. Then, in a drawer, an old one. With initials. The same as on her ID. And in the evening, a conversation with Matteo. Quiet. Dry. He tried to say something important, but it was as if he was swallowing his words. I didn't know. Not completely. I was afraid that if I told you, you would leave. And now? Now, I'm afraid you'll stay. And so she sits on the porch at night, alone. She looks at the house. And for the first time in many years, she feels strength. Not anger. Strength. Calm. Like water in a well. She doesn't know yet what tomorrow will bring, but she's ready. The day began hot. The air was heavy, like a reproach. The house seemed to creak, not with its boards, but with internal tension. Things didn't fall, but it felt like they were about to. Something in this space had come to a head. Clara rummaged through the old papers again, no longer hiding. In the living room, in plain sight, in front of her was a stack of letters, photographs, and cards with no dates, all with other people's signatures, but with her face, her features. Matteo entered silently. He stopped at the door. He watched, like a person who knows that there is no point in hiding anything anymore, but still hopes that if they remain silent, the storm will pass. Clara did not raise her head. I found a record, she said. In an old locket. A microfilm. There's a name. Your mother's. my surname, and the word adopted. Silence, deeper than usual. There was no confusion in it, only confirmation. You knew, Clara continued, or you guessed, but you kept quiet. Mateo moved closer. He sat down on a chair, as if for an interrogation. I heard my mother talking to someone on the phone once, about the girl who left too soon. I was 12. I didn't understand then. And then I just didn't ask. Clara looked at him. Why? He spread his arms. That's how we are. Silence is a habit. That's how we were raised. We don't ask questions. We adapt. I don't adapt, Mateo. I'm not here to fold in half. I'm a person. I'm someone who was thrown away, and no one even bothered to lie properly. He lowered his head. An hour later, everyone gathered in the living room. At her request. No snacks, no pleasantries. Just a table, chairs, and air stretched to breaking point. Clara stood by the window. In her hands was the medallion. I don't need sympathy, she began, but I need the truth. Mateo's mother sat upright, as if at a funeral. His father looked like a man who would rather die than admit a mistake. I know that woman in the portrait isn't a cousin. It's me. It's part of me. And you knew that. Her mother bowed her head slightly. Your mother was not someone we would have accepted into our family. She got pregnant, ran away. Then she came back. And then she left you. Clara took a step forward. She left me to you? No, her mother replied calmly. She left you to the world, and we chose not to take you. The words hung in the air like shadows on a wall, but the portrait? It was a reminder. A reminder of what? Her mother looked straight at her. Of weakness. Of what mustn't be repeated. Clara felt the ground beneath her feet shake, not physically, inside. As if everything she knew about herself was someone else's invention. And me? What are you doing to me now, if you're not repeating it? No one answered. Mateo stood up, walked over, and stood next to her. I'm sorry, he said, for not being there when I should have been. Clara exhaled, deeply, not because it felt easier, but because finally, the weight had come out. That night, she sat alone, with the medallion, with the letters, with herself. The truth did not bring relief, but it gave her bones, the skeleton of truth on which new flesh could be grown. Now she knew what she was dealing with, and she knew there was no going back. The morning after the revelation was quieter than usual. Even the birds seemed to have fallen silent. Clara stepped out onto the porch, a cup of coffee in her hands, her face looking as if it had been wind-burned from the inside. The truth did not bring relief. There were no hugs, no tears, no, "We're so sorry." Only glances that had become even heavier. Not direct, no. Now they turned away from her. And even that seemed more merciful than if they had shouted. Mateo tried to stay close, but you could feel that he was no longer between fire and water, but simply in between. His family had withdrawn from him. He didn't defend or accuse. He just hung there like laundry on a clothesline. You've changed the air in this house, Tomas said when they met again at the well. But not everyone knows how to breathe in a new way. Some suffocate and blame it on someone else's oxygen instead of their own lightness. Clara smiled. It's amazing you haven't soured up here yet. I've been hanging on by a thread for a long time. That's why I haven't gone bad. She looked at him. Has anyone ever told you that you're smart? Only by mistake. By lunchtime, it was clear that they were waiting for her, waiting for her to pack her things, leave the key, and leave quietly. It was as if the scene had already been written, and she just had to play her part. Mateo's mother sat at the table with some papers. She looked like a secretary who had been given the wrong form. "We can help you leave," she said dryly. "Tickets, travel expenses. We don't want you to feel unwanted." Clara put her cup on the table. "You don't want me to feel that way. But being unnecessary suits you just fine." "Everyone has their own truth," her father interjected. "You came here without asking. I came at your son's invitation, and I stayed because you didn't say anything. And now you're talking, but it still sounds like silence. What do you want? For us to fall to our knees?" "Number Swarohive, I want you to at least notice that I'm a person, not a mistake in the family accounts." They exchanged glances, like people who didn't like the results of a test. "Do you think it made it easier for you when you found out?" her mother asked. "You destroyed our peace." "Our peace, with your thirst for the truth." Clara stepped closer. "And you think I was at peace when I lived without a name, without a face, without memories? You raised your son looking at my face on the wall, and you didn't think about what it was like to be a living copy of the person you erased. We tried to forget. Well, I came to make you remember." She left without waiting for an answer. For the first time, she walked away proudly, even if her legs were shaking. That evening, Mateo didn't come home for dinner. Thomas said he had gone into town to unload. Clara didn't believe him. More likely, he had gone to hide. He needed time to decide whose side he was on, blood or truth. Left alone, Clara sat down at the table. Opposite her were empty plates, a reminder that even the dishes in this house were against her. But she ate, slowly, with a spoon in her hand and her back straight. Because she wasn't a guest, she was a survivor. Clara woke up because the house was too quiet. Not the quiet of early morning, when the whole world seems to be dozing, but the quiet of a hotel after all the guests have left. Empty, alien, without a trace. She stepped out into the hallway, barefoot, her eyelids heavy with sleep. The kitchen was empty. The dishes were stacked as if before a shift change. The pots were washed until they shone. There was no smell of food, no sound of footsteps, not even a forgotten cup. The refrigerator was empty. There was a note on the table. One line, no signature. "We're gone. For a long time. Don't wait." Clara didn't immediately understand what she was feeling. At first, nothing. Then something tugged at her ribs, like a string that had been pulled too tight. Then her chest felt empty. She sat down on a stool and looked at the wall. The portrait was still there, hanging with silent reproach. "Well," she said into the silence, "I'm alone again. What a surprise." She walked around the house as if it were a museum after closing time. She opened the cupboards. Empty. She looked into Mateo's room. No clothes, no books. Even the photographs were gone. There was no one in the barn. Thomas hadn't appeared at the well. She stood there for a moment, her face to the wind. The trees whispered as if they knew more than humans. Returning, she went to the sideboard and pulled out the bottom drawer. There lay an old photo album, one that no one ever looked at. Clara leafed through the pages. First were pictures of Mateo as a child, then his parents' wedding, then a picture of a woman who was the spitting image of her. Only her face was covered with a strip of paper, and underneath it were scratches, as if someone had tried to erase it. Clara took out a pair of scissors. She cut out the photograph. She stared at it for a long time, then lit the stove and threw the photo into the fire. The paper curled up, cracked, and burst into flames. The ashes scattered across the stove. Clara wiped them away with her hand. A gray mark remained on her fingers, like coal that cannot be washed off. The next day, she sorted through her belongings, slowly, not like someone who was leaving, but like someone who had decided to stay, no matter what. She made coffee in the kitchen and drank it slowly, with the pleasure of someone drinking their last cup before making a decision. There was no one else in the house, only her and the air, which still held the gazes, words, and expectations of strangers. Clara stood in the middle of the room. She didn't cry, not because there was no pain, but because tears are a luxury when you're empty inside. She hadn't lost, but she hadn't won either. She had simply stayed. And sometimes that's the scariest thing of all. Night fell like an old blanket, heavy, dark, stinking of thoughts. In this house, where no door creaked because everything had long since creaked away, Clara sat on the floor in her room, her back against the wall, her legs tucked under her. She didn't turn on the light. A light bulb hung from the ceiling on a thin cord, like a noose. But why did she need light? Everything she was afraid to see was already inside her. She thought she already knew the truth, but now she wondered if she knew anything at all. She picked up the locket and opened the lid again. Inside was a tiny photo. A woman. Her face seemed to be smiling, but in that smile there was a plea. Don't ask questions. Mom, Clara whispered. Or are you nobody to me? Or are you everything I ever had, only I didn't know it? Voices floated into her head. Not specific words, but intonations. Like in childhood, when a child remembers not the meaning, but the tone. You're strong, aren't you? Don't cry. Don't disgrace yourself. If you behave yourself, we'll give you a new dress. You're not needed. Accept it. Look how many children there are in orphanages. These phrases weren't from the past. They were like nails in her spine. They had grown together. And now, when someone pulled on one thread, her whole body responded. Clara laughed quietly, bitterly. I was taught to be convenient, and now they're surprised I'm not broken. She remembered hiding under the bed at 6 when her neighbor came home drunk. At 9, waiting for her mother at the school gate until she couldn't again. At 12, hearing that foster parents are people too, just with instructions. No tears came. They didn't even start. Apparently, they had dried up. Like hormones in a woman going through menopause. Maybe I really am soft, she whispered. Soft as clay. But you can mold clay into bricks if you fire it properly. And you bitches tried hard. Thank you. She stood up and went to the window. It was dark outside. Only a streetlight flickered like a lonely eye. Somewhere further away, maybe Thomas was there. Maybe not. But right now, Clara didn't need any witnesses. She knew that whatever happened next would be hers. Not by blood, not by surname. She was not a mole on a portrait, not a copy of someone else. She was what had survived when others remained silent. And on that night, she said it out loud, calmly, without drama. I am. And that's enough. The morning was gray, but not empty. It was as if the sky had exhaled and decided to just be. No drama, no hints. Clara got up early. This time, it wasn't because she couldn't sleep, but because she knew what she wanted to do. She washed the floor, slowly, thoroughly, not out of obedience, but so that the smell of dust would go away, so that this house would finally stop stinking of someone else's past. Then she opened the windows, let the wind in, and didn't close them. Let it blow through. Let it carry away everything that was stuck. She made coffee. Black. Bitter. No sugar. No milk. No illusions. Like life, only now It was her own. Then she went to the shed and found some old paint. Blue, slightly faded, and a brush. She climbed the creaky stairs to the second floor, to the hallway where the portrait hung. She took it off the wall, carefully, as if she were removing the skin that had held her captive for years. She put it in the corner. She didn't break it. She just put it away. And in its place, she began to paint the wall, tone by tone. Each stroke was like a statement. I am not who you made me out to be. Tomas came home for dinner. He saw it. Have you decided to repaint the past? Clara didn't turn around. No. I just threw away what I didn't need. The rest can stay, but I don't want it in my face. He nodded. You look good being yourself, even if you're covered in paint. She smiled. For the first time in years, I'm not afraid of getting dirty. During the day, a car pulled up at the house, an old, dark green one. Mateo got out, looking cold even in the heat. He saw her on the porch, paintbrush in hand, paint on her forehead. I didn't know if I should come back, he said. Clara looked at him. And I didn't know if I wanted your shadow. He lowered his eyes. I left because I was scared. Not of you, of myself, of this whole chain. The silence, the habits. I realized I was living like my parents. And you want to continue living like that? No, she nodded. Then don't start with apologies. Start with action. He moved closer. What do you want? She looked straight at him. I want you to stop being silent. Never. Even if the truth is scary. Even if I leave after hearing it. He nodded. It's a deal. That evening, Clara put the old kettle on the stove. Then she sat down to write a letter. Not to him. Not to herself. To the woman she had never really known. The one in the portrait. You were. I am. We were both afraid. But now I'm not afraid. Even if you're not my mother, I'm not your enemy. I just lived. And I will live. In my own way. And a signature. Just her first name. No last name, because surnames were for those who remained silent. And Clara was now speaking. On Sunday morning, Clara set the table herself. Nothing fancy. Bread, jam, coffee in an old copper kettle she had found in the shed, and polished to a shine. Mateo sat silently, but now there was no guilt in his silence. There was silence around them. The kind of silence you can breathe in. Half an hour later, they appeared in the house, her mother and father. They didn't rush in or burst in like in a bad play. They just walked in, like people who don't know why they've come, but can't help coming. Clara didn't get up. She didn't rush over. She just poured coffee. Would you like a cup? She asked evenly. Her mother nodded, uncertainly. Her father sat down opposite her and wiped the tabletop with his palm, a familiar, nervous gesture. Mateo stood up, but Clara stopped him with a gesture. I'll do it. This is my conversation. She looked straight at the woman who had hidden behind principles and an apron for so many years. You raised a son who doesn't know how to speak, only because you don't know how to speak yourself. Her mother flinched slightly, but she didn't argue. You left the portrait on the wall as a reminder of the pain, but you forgot that behind that face is me. Alive, with hands, with a heart, with memories you tried to erase. Silence. Only the spoon touched the cup and trembled. I won't seek revenge. I won't scream. But I won't leave. This place is part of me, whether you like it or not. Mateo's father stood up. He came closer. He looked her in the eyes. His lips trembled. but he couldn't find the words. And then he just nodded, as if he accepted. No loud words, no explanations. But honestly, Clara nodded in response. That was enough. She turned to her mother. I'm not waiting for an apology. But if you want to stay in this life, say so. Don't hide. Her mother looked at her as if she were a lost photograph. Longly. Weakly. I didn't have any words. Never. I lived by my actions. And more often than not, they were wrong. Then start with one right one. Don't be silent. She pressed her lips together. Then she exhaled. Welcome back. That evening, Clara moved the table closer to the window. Matteo helped her, and Thomas brought a chair that hadn't been used in a long time. They ate in silence, but there was no threat in that silence. There was opportunity. Then Clara got up. She went to the wall where the portrait had hung. Now there was only blank paint. There will be a mirror here now, she said, so that everyone can see themselves, not someone else's shadow. That evening she went to bed peacefully. For the first time in a long time, she felt no pain, no questions, just a sense that she had been heard. Not completely, not right away, but she had been heard, and that was enough to let go. The morning was warm, with the faint smell of toasted bread and cut grass. Clara stepped out onto the porch with a cup of coffee in her hands, wearing the same old robe, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. The same house, the same steps, the same kitchen. But everything seemed different, as if the walls had shifted, or maybe she just wasn't clinging to the edge anymore. Matteo's old boots were standing by the door, where he had left them the night before. Thomas was rummaging around the barn, throwing hay into a cart. Somewhere in the kitchen, dishes were clattering. Matteo's mother was washing something, without arguing or complaining, just doing her thing. There was now a mirror hanging on the wall in the hallway, a simple one with a wooden frame, polished to a shine. Clara walked over to it. She looked at it. For a long time, without judging. She just saw herself, as she was. Not a copy. Not an empty space. Not a memory. Alive. Heron. She ran her finger across the glass, leaving a mark. And she smiled. Quietly. Almost imperceptibly. Then she returned to the porch, sat down on the step, and tucked her legs under her. The sun touched her face. Softly, without pressure, and the wind was no longer hostile. Just wind. Clara took a sip of coffee. She closed her eyes. The silence was the same, but now it didn't hurt. Now it belonged to her. The end. If you've ever felt like a stranger in your own family, write the word oblivion in the comments. Let's see how many of us there are. Those who were overlooked, but stayed.